What do Walt Frazier, Oscar Robertson, and Larry Bird all have in common?
It's the Valley.
Don't go up there with me!
Spring number 1 has fallen. Got it!
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding from the words I spit. So sharp, so freezing, so cold. Behold, frostbite they feeling. I could take you apart or I could go heal them. Don't believe in fate, don't believe in ceilings. I just need a taste and my mind starts feeling. I don't pace myself, I'm grinding on kneeling.
Everyone knows that college basketball is dominated by the big schools. You've got your blue bloods, Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, Kansas. But come March Madness time, everyone likes to root for the underdog. And the argument could be made that over the past 20 years, no mid-major conference has better served as a bracket buster than the Missouri Valley. The second oldest conference in the country behind only the Big Ten, the MVC is comprised of Midwest institutions such as the Bradley Braves, Drake Bulldogs, Evansville Purple Aces, Illinois State Redbirds, Indiana State Sycamores, Missouri State Bears, Southern Illinois Salukis, Northern Iowa Panthers, and Valparaiso Beacons. Though clearly not one of the power conferences, the MVC often ranks as one of the best of the rest and is largely comparable to similar mid-major conferences such as the Atlantic 10 and the Mountain West. And did you know that the Missouri Valley Conference used to house some of the biggest schools in the country? That's right, schools such as Cincinnati, Iowa, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, Louisville, Memphis, Missouri, and Oklahoma all had stints as members of the Missouri Valley. Despite some key losses in recent years such as Creighton, Wichita State, and Loyola Chicago, the MVC appears to be as strong as ever, having recently reloaded with Illinois Chicago and annual mid-major powerhouses Murray State and Belmont. Alright, so what is so significant about the Missouri Valley? Well, I'm glad you asked. I analyzed every single NCAA tournament game over the past 20 seasons, from 2002 to 2022. That's 1,313 total games. By the way, quick math lesson. Do you know how many games are played in the NCAA tournament each year? Well, before you start trying to count brackets or do some math, think of it this way. There are currently 68 teams that make the NCAA tournament. One of those teams wins the whole thing. The other 67 have to lose a single game. Therefore, there are 67 total games played in the NCAA tournament. Shout out to my high school math teacher, Mr. Clark, for blowing my mind with that logic back in 2006. Now back to the Valley. Once again, I analyzed every single NCAA tournament game from 02 to 22. Over that time span, the Missouri Valley Conference received a total of 34 NCAA tournament bids with an average seed of 9.26. That comes in as the 12th highest seed average amongst all conferences. Take a look at this list and it seems pretty reasonable. You've got the 6 power conferences at the top, led by the ACC with an average seed of 5.21. Then you've got the American Conference, which began in 2013, has included some perennial powers such as Cincinnati, UConn, Houston, and Memphis. The WCC comes in at 8, obviously led by Gonzaga, along with St. Mary's and BYU. Then you've got the Atlantic 10 and Mountain West, both coming in just ahead of the Valley. Looking at win percentage, the MVC ranks 10th over the last 20 years with an overall NCAA tournament record of 33 and 34. Now on the surface, that doesn't seem very special, although they are notably ahead of rival conferences, the Atlantic 10 and the Mountain West. But now let's start to dig in just a little bit deeper. Expected wins is a stat that measures how far a team is expected to advance in the NCAA tournament based on their seed and the historical performance of other teams at that seed, and it excludes the planned game or the first 4 matchups. For example, a 1 seed is expected to win 3.34 games, an 8 seed is expected to win 0.72 games, and a 16 seed is expected to win 0.007 games. To provide a further example, the Ivy League was expected to win 5.96 games over the past 20 seasons based on their seeds and number of bids received. So with that being understood, the metric that we really want to look at is wins over expected. This takes a look at the actual number of wins that a conference secured and compares it to the number of games that it was expected to win. The higher the number, the more that conference has outperformed its expectations. The lower the number, the more that conference has underperformed. While we saw earlier that the Ivy League was expected to win 5.96 games over the past 20 NCAA tournaments, their actual number of wins was 5, leaving them with a win over expected of negative 0.96, meaning they slightly underperformed based on their expectations. When looking at this metric across all 32 conferences, the Missouri Valley Conference comes in as the 4th best, having won more than 6 games over what was expected, only behind the Big Ten, Horizon, and the Pac-12, which means that these are the 4 most overperforming conferences in the Big Dance over the past 20 years. Now, the Horizon League coming in at number 2 definitely caught me off guard, so I had to take a closer look. And digging into the results, you'll see that almost every single one of those wins for the Horizon League came from Butler between the years of 2003 and 2011 before they joined the Big East Conference. After all, they did make back-to-back NCAA championships in 2010 and 2011, plus 3 other Sweet 16 runs in that time frame. Looking at the other conferences, the ACC and SEC came in just behind the Valley at 5th and 6th. The American and MEAC are the last overperforming conferences, coming in at 11th and 12th. And take a look at these conferences at the bottom of the list. The Big 12 comes in at 26, and the final 4 spots are taken up by pretty significant conferences, with the WCC and Atlantic 10 coming in at 29th and 30th, the Big East coming in at 10.44 fewer wins than expected for 31st, and in dead last with a whopping 21.56 wins below expected, the Mountain West. MVC alumni break: Kyle Korver, Doug McDermott, Fred Van Fleet, Wes Unseld, Doug Collins, Percy Hawkins, Xavier McDaniel, Austin Reeves, Anthony Tolliver, Mike Glenn, Danny Granger, Troy Hudson, all former ballers in the MVC conference. Alright, so now we start to see where the Valley has really shined. They overperform. They thrive in the role of underdog. And as we talked about, everyone loves a good March Madness Cinderella story. So let's once again take a little bit of a deeper look at just how well the MVC has worn that slipper. Once again, analyzing all 1,313 NCAA tournament games over the past 20 seasons, I counted my own metric, something I'm calling underdog wins. An underdog win is anytime a higher seed knocks off a lower seed, such as a 12 seed upsetting a 5 in the first round. But in my underdog stat, I made the decision to exclude any game where the seeds were only 1 apart. For example, a 9 seed beating an 8 seed does not count as an underdog win. In my opinion, those teams are just too closely matched up for that to be considered an upset. And the same goes for any other matchup where the winning team is only 1 seed higher. A 2 beating a 1, a 5 beating a 4, a 13 beating a 12, and so on. None of those counted as underdog wins by my calculation. But any other win where the higher seed won was counted as an underdog win. A 10 beating a 7 gets the nod. A 3 beating 1, underdog win, and so on. So, of all 1,313 March Madness games since 2002, how many total underdog wins were there? 267. It's just a little bit over 20% of the total games. The schools over that span with the most wins that qualified as underdog wins: Syracuse, Butler, Michigan State, and Xavier. But how about if we look at underdog wins by conference? Here's the list of top 10 conferences by total number of underdog wins. And here you will see that the Missouri Valley comes in 5th overall with a total of 18 underdog wins since the 2002 NCAA tournament. But hold on, what do you notice here? All of these conferences surrounding the MVC on this list have received significantly more bids than the Missouri Valley. 102 bids for the SEC, 116 for the ACC, 123 for the Big Ten, 88 for the Pac-12, 129 for the Big East, and 118 for the Big 12. Even the Atlantic 10's 58 bids are quite a bit more than the MVC's 34. And yet look how often those Valley teams pump out the underdog wins. Now sure, a lot of these big conference schools didn't have the opportunity for underdog wins because they were top seeds. I get that, but that's not the point. The point is this: when you look at the average number of underdog wins per total NCAA bids received, the Missouri Valley comes in at the very top compared to all 32 conferences. With a score of .53, what that is saying is basically that for every 2 Missouri Valley Conference teams that makes the NCAA tournament, you can pretty much always expect at least one of them to pull out an upset win. And there is essentially no doubt that year after year, the Missouri Valley Conference has the highest probability to bring you those Cinderella bracket buster darlings. They've proven it time and time again, and the data backs it up. After all, take a look at every school that the MVC has knocked out of the NCAA tournament in the past 20 years. Alabama, Arizona, Cal Poly, Cincinnati, Dayton, Florida, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Gonzaga, Holy Cross, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, 3 times, Kansas State, LaSalle, Miami, Nevada, Ohio State, Pitt, 2 times, Seton Hall, St. Mary's, Tennessee, 2 times, Texas, Texas Tech, UNLV, Vanderbilt, Virginia Tech, and Wichita State. Other than maybe 2 of those wins, these aren't exactly your Southwest Bible colleges of the Blind Sisters. The Valley knocks off the heavy hitters almost year in and year out. If there's one person who understands what it's like to go against a Valley team in the big dance, it's Kansas coach Bill Self. He's been knocked out in 2006 by Bradley, 2011 by Northern Iowa, 2015 by Wichita, and barely escaped in 2007 versus Southern Illinois Salukis team in the Sweet 16. And it's not like it's just been a single team making all the noise for the MVC. In the last 20 years, 9 MVC teams from 5 different schools have advanced to the Sweet 16. Southern Illinois in 2002, Wichita and Bradley both in 2006, Southern Illinois in 2007, Northern Iowa in 2010, Wichita in 2013 and 2015, Loyola in 2018 and 2021. And of those 9 Sweet 16 teams, only 1 was seeded better than a 7.
And the Missouri Valley Conference has done it again. Big-time power conferences, SEC and Big 12 flame out, courtesy Missouri Valley Conference.
And on top of the 5 schools with Sweet 16 runs over the past 20 years, 2 more Valley schools have won March Madness games in that span in Creighton and Drake, and another has received a bid to the NCAA tournament in Indiana State. And lastly, we have to at least give a mention to the fact that in 2006, Missouri State was absolutely hosed, being the highest rated team in college basketball history to not get an at-large bid. They were inexplicably left out despite sporting an RPI of 21 on Selection Sunday. So all of this just goes to say that the MVC is an extremely deep conference. Heck, in 2019, Evansville won on the home floor of #1 ranked Kentucky, and that same season, Evansville finished 0-18 in the Valley. Some of the schools that have departed the MVC may be finding out that the grass isn't greener on the other side. Creighton left the Valley in 2013, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. The new Big East is a great fit for them, and they've been consistently ranked in the top 25, even though they've only had marginal success in the NCAA tournament, going 4-5 since leaving the MVC. Wichita State, on the other hand, has certainly not experienced the same level of success. In their final 5 seasons in the Missouri Valley, Wichita went a combined 10-5 in the NCAA tournament. In the 5 seasons since they left the Valley, they're 0-2 in the Big Dance, having yet to win a single NCAA tournament game. Oh yeah, and did I mention that one of their 2 losses in the NCAA tournament was to a Missouri Valley team when Drake beat them in the first 4 in 2021. Wichita left a stable conference with a rich tradition in the MVC for an incredibly shaky conference in the American. With schools all over the map geographically, this conference was never built to stay steady. Since Wichita joined 5 years ago, some of the best schools in the AAC have already announced their departure, including UConn, Cincinnati, Houston, and Central Florida. So in case nobody has said it yet, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Shockers, you done screwed up. And Loyola Chicago, really? The Missouri Valley Conference made you. I still vividly remember how ticked off Valley fans were when you were announced as Creighton's replacement in 2013. Your program had done nothing in 50 years. You joined the MVC, Final Four in 2018, Sweet 16 in 2021, but then you bounced for the Atlantic 10. And how are you doing now? Year 1 outside of the MVC, and let's see. Dead last out of 15 teams in the Atlantic 10 with a net ranking near 300. I think Sister Jean preferred the Missouri Valley. The MVC replaced Loyola with UIC to keep the Chicago market, plus Murray State and Belmont, who have combined for 17 NCAA tournament berths in the last 20 years and geographically fit perfectly into the footprint of the league. Big W.
Just because we have schools leave, nothing changes.
Alumni break: Bruce Weber, Dana Altman, Mark Turgeon, Tubby Smith, Nick Nurse, Kevin Stallings, Willis Reed, Denny Crum, Matt Painter, Henry Iba, Fogg Allen, John Wooden, James Naismith. All former coaches from the Missouri Valley Conference. So now that we've seen the data, what is it that makes the Valley so special? Well, first, we've mentioned the rich history. Did you know that the Valley has sent 18 teams to the Final Four? This includes appearances from current members Bradley in 1954, Drake in 1969, Indiana State in 1979, and 2 appearances in the past 9 years from Wichita State in 2014 and Loyola Chicago in 2018. Not bad for a mid-major conference. And how about the size of the institutions? The majority of the MVC schools have enrollments between 5 and 20,000 students. And the truth is, these basketball programs are often the biggest show in town. Carbondale, Illinois, Cedar Falls, Iowa, Springfield, Missouri, Terre Haute, Indiana, Peoria, Illinois, Murray, Kentucky. Not only will you find no Six Flags locations near these campuses, but you'll be lucky to find a Chuck E. Cheese. These are college towns through and through, and the local communities are rabid about their basketball teams.
Well, there's no place in the Valley where you go where you have an easy game.
I know you've heard of March Madness, but how about Arch Madness? One of the best conference tournaments in the country. Every March, these MVC schools meet at the central location of St. Louis, battling it out for the automatic bid. And when I say battle it out, I do not use that term lightly. This conference plays rugged, in-your-face defense and is an absolute bloodbath night in and night out. And lastly, March Madness success. We've detailed all of the examples on how the MVC has repeatedly come up clutch come tourney time, knocking off the big boys at a higher clip than any other conference. Everyone loves to root for the underdog, and the MVC has been the most consistent underdog over the past 20 years. Did you know that the past 14 Valley teams to make the big dance have a record of 12-2 in their opening games?
It's a basketball league.
160.
I mean, come on, guys. Figure it out. And we're not going anywhere.
So next time you're filling out your brackets, just remember, the Valley runs deep.